Hey, so I had a weird week and not going to be a full edited, research, scripted video today. So that's going to be coming next week, and I have some ideas planned, some fun ideas planned for future videos. But this week there was some stuff that prevented me from uh, working on videos, and so well, we've got this. I kind of do one of these every once in a while where I just kind of talk at the camera. Main topic of discussion today is something that is very important to me, and that's the topic of video game archiving and preservation. There's been a renewed conversation around that with what some of you may have heard of as the news that of the impending PS3, PSP, and Vita stores shutting down. So why should you care about that? Basically, what's happening is that Sony is shutting down the PS3 stores. When I say, I don't feel like saying all three of them at the same time, so I'm just going to refer to them in a group as the PS3 store. Sony's closing down their old storefronts. What that means is that after that point, you aren't going to be able to purchase anything on those consoles. From what I understand, you can still download content that you've already purchased, but you can't purchase new things, and this includes games as well as like DLC and add-ons. That doesn't seem like a big deal on its own, but that's not the entire story. Well, there's two things. The first is that some games were only ever released on the PS3 and not the PS4, and PS4 and PS5 are not backwards compatible with the 3, which means that some games are just landlocked to the PS3. That becomes an issue for games which have a so-called time limit. So to put it simply, the PlayStation 3 has an internal battery, and it's basically to verify the system's internal clock. Some games have time limits to ensure something. It's not super clear exactly what. For some games it seems to be to ensure the validity of trophies. For some games it seems to be temporary content, like I don't know, maybe a demo or something like that. Some games, no idea. They just have a time limit on them. And what that means is that when that battery eventually dies, which PlayStation 3 is around a 15-year-old console now, the battery is eventually going to die, and when that happens, the console can't check with the batteries, the internal clock. It has to check the PSN server, and because the PS3 servers are going down, if you have a game with a time limit, digital only, and your battery dies, you can no longer access that content. It's on your machine, it's on your console, but you can't open it. There's a video of someone demonstrating this already. This is something that really peeves me about basically every big video game company, is a general lack of care for their own legacies. Some are really good about it and some really aren't. Nintendo is like one of the worst offenders in this regard, just refusing to re-release some of their most classic games unless it's in a really lazy collection. The problem, and what's scary from an archiving perspective, is that, let's say, Super Mario 64, one of the most classic games of all time, never re-released until a limited time digital only collection. So let's say the official versions of this game, of course you can pirate it, but let's talk just the official versions of the game. Well, eventually the original cartridges are going to rot and they're going to stop working, and eventually every N64 is going to stop working until they get refurbished, but the amount that are going to get refurbished is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And then all of the Switches that have the Mario 25th anniversary, was it 25th or 30th? I forget, that have that collection, eventually something similar to what's going on with the PlayStation Store right now might happen. Nintendo could shut down the Switch servers, as they've already done for the Wii and Wii U eShops. They might have a similar system in place to ping a server, and then eventually every Switch is going to stop working. And then where do you play Mario 64? Nintendo doesn't seem to be interested in re-releasing it. The answer is that you pirate it. Yeah, it's something that people really don't like to talk about. People have this weird sensitivity with piracy. Not everyone, but there's a lot of people who look at piracy as like the worst possible crime you could ever commit. And it's funny because I've been regularly kind of around emulation and emulation communities, and when you talk to these people who code emulators, who dump ROMs, and who ensure that like there's libraries and archives of games that are like kept accurate and are expanding, when you read what these people have to say on forums, they're not like criminals. They're not like scheming, scummy, they're trying to take corporations down. They're just people who really love games, and they want to make sure that future generations are able to play them. There's several games, Star Fox 2 would be a good example, that were never officially released, and were only released, it was only officially released after the leaked beta had become somewhat well known because of emulation and because of ROM dumping. And that's just like a piece of history. It's a full Star Fox game in like a classic franchise that just never would have emerged unless it was because of people who emulated it, and they did it because they loved Star Fox and they have a passion for gaming and its history. I don't think, just to be clear, I don't think I'm legally allowed to tell anybody to go emulate any games, even though emulation is completely legal. Only emulators are legal, but emulating games is technically illegal. It's sort of weird. But it brings up a discussion and kind of a tough question of, if companies are not interested in preserving their own history, is it really unethical to just do it yourself? I really don't think so. Because there's repeated evidence that executives at the corporations who own a lot of these properties sometimes just don't care about their own history and their own archives. Let's take another good example: the PS Vita store shutting down. Now the PlayStation Vita, this one's actually kind of scary, because now miraculously there are functioning PS3 emulators and PSP emulators that work quite well, but there's not really a well-functioning PlayStation Vita emulator. And that's concerning because the Vita didn't sell great, at least not in the West, and there aren't a lot of copies, like physical copies, of games. For instance, a lot of Persona 4 Golden, which thankfully got a PC release completely randomly. Say that Sega hadn't sprung for a PC port of P4G, the Vita store closes. Now that game's a lot harder to get a handle of. One of like the most classic JRPGs, like a modern classic, never re-released, never ported. Again, we're ignoring if we're saying the PC port didn't happen. How do you play it? You can't even emulate it. I got really worked up about this the first time that I kind of like sat down and thought about this topic, and with all this news coming out. I've calmed down now. I've processed my feelings a little better, because it it annoys me so much. the way that games, which are real pieces of history now, the way that they're generally thought of as toys by the people who own those properties, just like disposable. There's a really awful interview with Jim Ryan, head of PlayStation of America, I believe, from 2017, where he said literally, why would you want to play old games? He basically citing the graphical fidelity is so much better. It's like a child's understanding of art. It's like the kid who thinks that like Transformers is better than Psycho because it has robot explosions. The whole point of this video is just to think about the accessibility of media, of games compared to other media. There's a great GDC talk by Frank Cifaldi, who has done work for a lot of preservation work, and also worked on the Megaman Legacy collections, which like I'm not a huge fan of them, but he really cares about it, and he has this great point about how easy it is to get classic movies, right? Like The Wizard of Oz, incredibly famous, popular landmark movie, and there's so many ways to buy The Wizard of Oz officially. You can stream it, you can get any number of re-releases, and even like weird obscure movies get like get re-released, like old horror movies and sci-fi movies. Those get re-released with like Blu-ray upscaling and remastering and like DVD extras for even just like the weirdest little blip in film history. And whereas if you want to play a lot of old games, the easiest way to do it, like a lot of old Nintendo games, I don't know, maybe it'll come up on the eShop or whatever the Switch's thing is, you know, the one that has like 10 games on it. For instance, Shatterhand, a great NES game that I would consider it a hidden gem, came out late in the console's lifespan. I live streamed my playthrough of it. Never re-released. It's not on the Switch. It's only available either in a physical copy you have to buy off of eBay, or you can just pirate it. I don't even know if the company exists anymore. Why don't games get the same treatment and really, I guess, the word I'm looking for is reverence as other forms of media? Books, music, movies especially, get so much care and put into preserving their history, and games, publishers just seem to have like an iron clasp on them, and it makes emulation and honestly piracy all the more important and valuable. I wouldn't have been able to play Shatterhand if it weren't for good old Vim. It's tough because legally you can't really, like, you know, I can't force Nintendo to re-release a game. They just have to decide whether or not they want to do that. What would be great is some kind of update to, and this is a total dream scenario, but an update to public domain laws that would allow, you know, kind of similar to what a lot of other rights agreements have, where, you know, if you don't want to re-release Mario 64 for 20 years, it's in the public domain. Like, if you're not interested in making money off of it, it's the world, it's everyone's now. There is such an untapped market of people who are interested in classic games. I grew up watching people like the Angry Video Game Nerd, or even like, you know, just like old Screw Attack videos. Are they even called Screw Attack anymore? And I just remember like hearing like game OSTs in the background. I heard so much like Banjo-Kazooie music growing up. I've never even played Banjo-Kazooie. but I know about it because these people who loved these games put it into their work, and they shared some of their love with their audience. There's probably a lot of people right now who know about these games. I mean, how many classic titles has, you know, Smash Ultimate introduced to like kids who now just don't have a way to play them? When I was little, there were always AMC, for instance. I would always watch movies, like classic 80s movies with my dad on like AMC, because there was a market and an interest in movies that he loved when he was growing up. He got to show to me and share that experience with me. And unfortunately, that doesn't exist in a very large capacity. I don't think in as strong a capacity as it could, for the return you could get on it for video games. And so what I would love to see is an embrace of archiving and preservation by companies. I know that it's like really unrealistic, and that's what sucks. And I think as long as these kinds of mindsets persist, it's unfortunately going to fall to the community of people who hold value for these things. These works of art is what they are. And it's a shame, but the people who love them will work very hard, and I can't say anything because I've never dumped games or anything. But they'll work very hard to make sure that other people will also be able to experience that. I mean, just with the news of the PS3 store, you know what I've seen is terabytes and terabytes of people dumping the entire PS3 library online. Like, that's what it does. If you don't want people to pirate your games, maybe give them access to it without shutting down your whole store. And by the way, this is going to happen to the PS4. This is going to happen to the PS4 too. It absolutely will. And the PS5. It's going to be... PS3 was 15 years from now. Or 20 years from now. But it's going to happen. They're going to shut down the stores. And unless the PS6 is backwards compatible, which who knows, guess what? You might just not, and it works the exact same way. It has the exact same system, at least right now, of having to ping a server to verify digital content on startup. So everyone who is so opposed to piracy now, in like 20 years when you want to play Spider-Man, might be changing your tune. Anyway, I hope that this really long, rambly video gave you something interesting to think about, or maybe introduced you to a concept, to a thing that's going on that you had no idea about. This is something that I'm very passionate about. I love retro games. Look at this slime on either side of me. You know what this is from? This is from what the heck is the game called? The Haunting, for The Haunting or The Haunted, from on DOS. that's where my little skull is from. That's where my little skull is from. that same game. Hopefully, at least someone out there becomes interested in archiving like I am. I'll be back next week with a new video. I've got like a couple ideas. I don't know which one I'm gonna go with, but it's gonna be pretty fun. So I'll see you then. Bye.